Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Aisling Chin-Yee, a producer of documentaries and features and an activist who co-founded Canada's After Me Too movement with Mia Kirshner and Freya Ravensbergen in 2018. In 2019, she made her feature directorial debut with The Rest of Us, a drama starring Heather Graham as a single mother who invites her ex-husband's second wife and daughter to live with her and her daughter after his untimely death. It arrives on digital and on demand today. Aisling picked Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee's landmark drama about people getting on each other's nerves in a Brooklyn neighborhood on the hottest day of the year. Set in and around a pizza place in Bedford-Stuyvesant, it follows a dozen or so key characters played by an amazing ensemble that includes Danny Aiello, John Turturro, Richard Edson, Rosie Perez, Giancarlo Esposito, John Savage, Frankie Faison, Martin Lawrence, Bill Nunn, Stephen Park, Samuel L. Jackson, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, Joy Lee, and Lee himself as they order slices, bump shoulders, pick fights, and get angrier and angrier. Released in 1989, Do the Right Thing is distressingly relevant to our present moment, picking apart neighborhood tensions to reveal the deep divides between people that allow bias and mistrust to fester into hatred. And as Roger Ebert pointed out at the time, it's a film that makes it really difficult to take sides, even though in the end, there's only one. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's an interesting time for everything right now, for like the upheaval that's happening in 2020. And like the changes that are happening in all industries and everything like that, but specifically how we can kind of like shine a light on the film industry in the way that we also reflect the world and what we do. But yeah, I also obviously rewatched Do the Right Thing. Like that movie was such an influential film for me as a young filmmaker and as a film student. I was like, as a teenager, I was like obsessed with New York. This is where I wanted to live. This is where I wanted to go. I was, obsessed with getting to NYU and all that kind of stuff, which I never actually finally did. I interviewed there for grad school and then was like, I have no idea how I'm going to afford to do this unless anyway.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was like I was doing a little trailing. I was like, how can I fangirl to Spike Lee, because he was such an amazing, interesting filmmaker of every decade, but specifically, if you look at the 90s, he's such a voice at that time. But yeah, it's shocking, of course, we all remember what happens in the film, but it's shocking to see how it's reflecting what is happening right now, It's terrifying in a way too.
Yeah, 31 years and it hasn't aged a day. It's just
yeah.
And it's unparalleled. That's the thing that really shocked me watching it again this time, was that it's even more. I don't know how many times I've watched it all the way through, in a single sitting, probably 5 or 6 over the decades. But this time through, I think there was this persistent nausea that kicked in about around the second act. Just this thing start to tip. The scene, I think it was the scene with Sal talking to Mookie's sister, and
yes, yeah.
both Mookie and Pino just sort of giving him the side eye and knowing what was going on. And just this sense that as much as Lee tries to empathize with everybody and really does, I don't think there are villains in the film. There's just racism and tension. That's the poison that seeps into everybody. That moment where the film really comes out and says Sal doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand how he comes off to people. His idealized version of himself is just so completely different. And I agree with Ebert. I don't think Sal was ever going to actually try anything with her. I don't think he would, but he's being incredibly creepy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and she insists that it's not the case because she's known him since she was a kid, but it's literally it's visible to literally everyone else. And that was that one thing that just made me start clenching even before anything else happens, because I know how it's going, I know where it's going, but Lee does such a great job of introducing these little tentacles, these little threads of unpleasantness and interactions that are disproportionate or the imbalance of power that runs through the whole thing. And I was reading over some other reviews, and people were arguing over, not even arguing, the reviews are arguing with each other over the nature of the beef. Is it because Sal won't put up pictures of black people Or is it because Bugging Out's request of him is unreasonable? Or is it because of the way it escalates? And nobody's wrong. It's incredible. Everybody has a legitimate position. But once I saw Sal being a creep, it's just like, oh no, this was always going to happen. The heat, the racism, that was always just a catalyst.
Mm-hmm. And also, yeah, I mean, it's interesting watching that moment too, especially in this, in this day and age too, like post Me Too and everything like that, where, it's not an unknown fact that, of everything that Spike Lee does really well, his representation of female characters is not his strongest point,
Sure.
But yeah, like just the, and as we see what's happening today, I'm like, oh, there's so much shock of like, well, I never knew this was going on, or I'm not, as you hear from other people that well, I don't feel racist. I personally, this is like an attack on me as like somebody who's never said these things or whatever, and
sure.
I'm using I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the eye of the public or whatever, but that like, these things are happening and racism is happening and systemic injustices are happening, and saying that just because you are not actively participating in racism doesn't mean that you don't have racist, biases, or you don't have a bias in any kind of way, whether it's, gender bias, religious bias, economic bias, like sociostatus, like anything like that, that's not going to like inform the way that you interact with other people on an unconscious level, so yeah, it's an interesting place to like relate, like, yeah, Sal's own kind of, wool that he's pulled over his eyes, because he is a very sympathetic character for a lot of it, like you see his like, passion and power and like his and his, well, you see his empathy and his compassion for, Mookie and the people that are coming to his shop, and feeling the pride there that obviously is in flux with like, in contradiction with John Turturro's character,
Yeah.
but that like, push comes to shove, he's going to go to those places of deep, dark feelings, and like, it's going to come out. And yeah, and the heat of New York at, and Brooklyn, and the color and the setting, and New York in the 80s, like just like as the backdrop and as like the, the stage for what's going on is just so vibrant and so like amazing and beautiful for all, like, to make all these sort of like complex arguments,
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of it feels stagey is the wrong word, but there's definitely a proscenium aspect to a lot of the shots that he's chosen. Just the way that he sets up every location or every space as an individual location. I mean, it's 2 blocks really,
Yeah.
one set of corners, and then the two sides of that street that radiate outward. But it's so distinctive. There's a moment where I think when DeMayer comes up to Mother Sister's fence, and he basically crosses an axis from another angle, but it feels like he's traveled 10 miles because her window is so calm and serene, and behind him there are these kids scrambling around and just all this activity. And it feels like almost like the whole thing could have been shot on a soundstage for the slight stylization that Ernest Dickerson's camera brings to it, and the colors, the Vicente Minnelli imagery that he uses for the 3 men sitting under the patio table awning. Maybe 2 blocks away, you could have A Streetcar Named Desire happening, like that level of heat and enhanced emotion and exaggerated tensions, but. Also, yeah, it feels like New York in the late 80s. I didn't get there until 92, my first trip. And it was like, where can I find all of those things that I've seen, all of the movie locations that I've seen, these incredible, just the brownstones and the tenements that were still sort of standing down in the Lower East Side. And I just walked around with, like eyes as big as saucers, just taking it all in, and never made it to Brooklyn. Yeah. And now, I mean, there's a couple of places in Brooklyn that don't have big buildings in the background, but now Bed-Stuy and Do the Right Thing feels like a small town, right? Like it feels like a microcosm isolated again from New York City just because of the lack of development, which is sort of the point. But it's stunning. It feels like a time capsule, and it feels completely immediate at the same time. I don't know that you can do that on purpose. It's just a combination of skill, subject matter, and the creation of that world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's whenever I go to New York, I always stay at my friends in Bed-Stuy. So it's really I always get like a little fun little thing of like walking through the streets and be like, oh, like this is and there is a lot of like tribute to Do the Right Thing and Crooklyn and stuff like that. People there was like point, there's street corners that are kind of pointed out, and that kind of stuff,
Right.
which is like great for a geek like me. But yeah, and it's and I think with the amazing opening with Rosie Perez and her dancing at the opening credit sequence, and it being and having all of those backdrops on a stage, like it's like this is the theater that you're going to enter into, with the power of like her very 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 physical dancing and like the music and everything like that. That's just like, oh, this is the world we're going to enter, which is so much fun. Like he doesn't pull any of his punches for how he's going to go to use like the cinematic language to really tell every element of the story and to be part of just from the costume to the setting to the camera to his breaking the fourth wall and so many of his films, and this one included, which that brings it back to something that's happening in real life, brings it back to something that is like a true incident that has happened. And so him ending the film with a dedication to the families of people who have been killed by police officers, that in that time period of between like 1986 to 89 or something in that zone, and it's just like, it's so shocking of just like, you take that movie, you put it now, it's George Floyd, it's Ahmaud Arbery, it's Breonna Taylor, it's so many, being relevant is like we all want our movies to stay relevant, but it's also very disheartening that like it is so like these lessons are still being learned, and are still being ignored until this moment now of Black Lives Matter and everything, that hopefully there's going to be a sustained change and like some institutional, change is happening. Yeah. But it's just like the fact that you have to see something like Radio Raheem's murder in real life actually happening to a man for change to actually happen. It's like, well, couldn't we have learned from the fictionalized version of that murder? Do we have to have the shock of actually seeing somebody get killed, in the media to understand that this is the thing that's been happening for decades and generations, and now we have iPhones to actually shine a light on these things, when it's like, well, that was what filmmaking has always been. We've always been telling these stories, we've been telling them in a way that's supposed to represent real life, and now you have to have real life taken away on screen to actually understand what that message was from a movie 31 years ago. Like, I hope we evolve, as a society, and I think that we are. I have a hope that this is a changing moment, but like, yeah.
Somebody was pointing out the other day, where was it? Was it on The Big Story, or maybe it was on the last post of a podcast that I listen to daily? Someone was pointing out that this time is different because the pandemic has isolated everyone and we have nothing to do but watch. Like, we are unable to be distracted from what's going on. And previously, every time there was a wave of protest, it would die out in 3 or 4 days because there'd be some other distraction, or people would just have to go to work and stop thinking about it. And the nature of the world was such that you just rolled through whatever was happening. And now, as we're seeing that, they're still protesting in Minneapolis. It's just that the cameras aren't covering it as much. It may not be happening. It may not be on the nightly news, but we're still seeing the social media of it, and we're still seeing the organizers talking about it. And so it won't go away. And even though we're going back too early, I think, but people are talking about reopening before the virus is really dealt with. Even though that's happening, it's still not enough of a distraction for those of us who are paying attention to stop paying attention. And to your point about seeing things in movies versus real life, have you seen the clip that Lee built where he's edited the scene from? Yeah. It's no time has passed. It's absolutely distressing. But I think the difference is that in Do the Right Thing, it looks it's aestheticized. It's some of those shots are beautiful. Not the shots of Bill Nunn being choked to death, but there is a beauty to a lot of the images in Do the Right Thing that I think makes it easier to watch. And some part of your brain is saying, "Oh, it's not real." But when you're just watching, when you're watching the footage of a man being murdered by a police who's just casually leaning on his throat, and the angle is raw, and the lighting's wrong. Like it looks, you can't dismiss it the way that you can with a clip from a movie. And so I found it really jarring to watch that. I get what he's doing, but it was also a reminder of why you could go see Do the Right Thing and just shake it off. And I forgot to ask at the top, what was your first experience of it? Did you see it in '89 in a theater, or did you catch up to it later?
No, I started watching. I'm trying to remember actually when I was first introduced to it. It may have been when I was in film school in the early 2000s, in like American independent cinema class or something like that. But I had been introduced to Spike Lee's films before I watched that film. Like I had seen, strangely, like I watched Clockers a ton as a teenager, and it was like that is not one of his like many, named films, but it is actually still. I still think it's a decent film.
That's Mekhi Phifer's first film, right? Like that was a huge deal for him at the time.
Yeah, that was his first film. Him and Harvey Keitel, and it was just so like it's also just like I just remember watching that movie, watching Crooklyn, and just being so. I didn't understand why it was so colorful. Like I was just figuring out as somebody who like I didn't grow up in a film fan. Like I grew up watching films, but I didn't grow up in a family of filmmakers or anything like that. And just trying to figure out why the colors were so bold and so saturated and so vibrant. Like how do you, in a way that I don't even know if I consciously understood it. Besides like, oh, that's the color of the clothes. It's the style. It's like. That's what the color of it was, and just going, that's what it must feel like, like there's something so larger than life and like bold and like unapologetic about his filmmaking. And, and I grew up in Nova Scotia in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, which, historically has been very like segregated and, racial, there's a lot of racial tensions there. There's a lot of, and growing up as a racialized person there, but neither, like I'm mixed race. I'm half Chinese, half Irish. My parents are both immigrants, and we ended up in Nova Scotia. But kind of recognizing some of that like tension that existed in where I grew up, and seeing that on screen, but told through an American lens, and being like, oh, there's something relatable here. But also because he uses humor, I'm totally going off of on a different tangent from your question right now.
This is what it's all about. We'll get there.
But yeah, just like the way of like, being unapologetic about one's experience, and also bringing in the drama with a humoristic side to it, being like, oh, you can tell a joke, you can be complex, you can be a little off color, you can say the wrong thing, and be on the right side moralistically or whatever. Like there's gray zones in who we are as individuals, and there's something really wonderful to see that reflected on screen. And I got very excited about that film and some other films as well, but like being introduced to his movies. And so when I saw Do the Right Thing, I think like I was lucky. I came to Montreal, went to Concordia, and did communications and film studies here in Montreal. But and it was this great film teacher I had, and who of course his name is escaping me right now, but like he was, he tried to get like everything we always tried to get, like a 35 millimeter print of, and I think he was able to get one of Do the Right Thing. And being like an 18 or 20-year-old kid, like sitting and watching this movie and in a theater, and then getting a chance to actually discuss and like, and kind of unpack what you saw on screen, because it's still like, just in the title alone, it's like Do the Right Thing. That is not clearly asked or answered in the movie, and it can't be, because of course we're coming at it with so many different experiences and understandings, and because like you said, there are no true villains in the film, except for the police officers, I would say, like, and again, like they're very recognizable tropes, but like those tropes exist for a reason, and it's unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
even the one guy who comes off as sort of okay, Miguel Sandoval's cop, kicks Raheem's corpse 3 or 4 times out of anger. Like it's clearly he's saying get up, but he's furious. It's first time I saw it, I admit I thought it was he's scared and he's just trying to put on a show of him being alive, and then this time through it's like no, he doesn't care about him at all. It's just that the police are not the good guys in any way in this movie.
No, exactly. And even in that, like, and there's so much there's so many characters in this film, that's it's such an introduction to such a like vibrant community. But if you see it, like, and there's obviously a lot of talking in it, but like the dialogue is actually really, really lean and so layered and intelligent. And just in that cop you were talking about, when what's that actor's name, like famous Italian American actor who's his car gets soaked by the
Frank Vincent, who will show up in Goodfellas
exactly. That when in the interaction he's having with them about like, well, do you like who soaked your car and everything like this, and then he says both as a threat to his character, to Frank Vincent.
Yeah.
Okay. To his character, is like, you better get to your cars soon before these people strip it clean. And it's like, oh, that's just every second line is so racially charged in this movie by every single person who is speaking about somebody or themselves or what's going on. And it's just like the rigor of like the message in every single element of this film is just it's remarkable, like.
Yeah, and even in that scene, in that exchange, one of the cops calls out Frank Vincent on his racism, right? When he's trying to say, I can't remember like the two names, he like Jim and Joe or something like that, and then he just says black, and the cop says, "Oh, so they're brothers, not they're brothers as in a racial term, but as in you're calling them." Like he's just taking it as though black is their last name and just pushing it back at him. And it's just this, it's a little cute little moment of dialogue, but exactly. It's another level of that conversation that they're having about who they are to each other and how the black characters are still outside of it.
Exactly.
So you saw it in film school. That would have been great. How did it play? Like, how did it play for an audience? When I saw it in '89, it was at a press screening. It had just come out of Cannes. It was a big deal. That those of us who didn't go to Cannes were seeing it, and I was 20 in the summer of '89, and I had seen his other films, and I knew who Spike Lee was, and I'd been following all the conversation out of Cannes, and it was just, I mean, again, and this is before the internet, this is reading interviews in newspapers and magazines basically, and it still felt like a bolt of lightning. It was, and I saw it with, I'm going to guess, a 95% white audience on a Wednesday night, like 7:00 Wednesday night preview screening. The tickets had been distributed over the radio the way they used to be in the old times. And people were like dead silent. There was no engagement. There was some laughter early on. The jokes landed. It played really well. And then in the last 40 minutes, it just, the volume in the room just dropped down. There was an incredible tension. You could feel it. But it was received with absolute silence, and the movie ended, and people got up and immediately started talking to each other, but in a really kind of silent, kind of low, reverent sort of way, because it just walloped us.
Yeah.
And this, when you saw it, it would have been about 10 years later or so, and.
Yeah, it would have been. I'm trying to think. In 2000, or like I was in university 2004, so it would have been probably not in the first year that I was there, probably in the second or third year. And I mean, it was a similar experience. Like, one, it was like, just again, like, I think to show a group of like young people at that time this film, and some people had seen it and some people hadn't, but it really was like that. There is like a bolt of lightning kind of experience through it, and a charge that, like, where you feel, you know, obviously like the character that we know the best is Mookie. And so you feel his journey of being, you know, like he's, you know, an individualistic person, like just like trying to, you know, do his thing. And then he does have to make this decision, you know, after Radio Raheem is killed, to be like, I'm going to now, I've got to stand up for something. Like the first time he has to actually do this, and picks up the garbage can and throws it through the window. And of course there's this continued debate, and people are having it now about like, what does it mean when property damage and looting and stuff like that. And when the anger has bubbled up so much and the frustration has bubbled up so much that this is the mode of communication for these feelings and this injustice, you know? And so that debate of being like, well, it's not like it's going to change anything, you know, like what, it's not like the people that are lost when it's like, well, you like, that's whatever is wrong, racial injustice, aside. And yes, like the cops have, you know, did something terrible. They murdered this guy, but you still can't hurt property. And it's like, let's just put everything into perspective and like and I think now there's, you know, now that the media is like kind of recognizing, because they've been criticized in what's going on now, that's like, if you only show those images that are such a small percentage of what's happening, but you don't put a kind of context to like, why do these things happen? Why do neighborhoods get vandalized during times of complete, you know, unrest and protest, because there is an institution and a system that's now being riled against in a way that like we've got your attention. And also it's proof of the huge socioeconomical barriers that exist for a lot of marginalized communities. And to then go, yes, but like it's not like that he should have done that. So that debate I remember happening, and again, like I went to a very, very like, you know, at the time at Concordia, I don't know if you remember, but it was like very, very left-leaning, very politically charged. Like we had the first year that I was there in 2000 was when they tried to bring Netanyahu in to speak. And then there was a huge we all sat out the hall building, you know, it was like a huge protest of like, no, you can't bring this like war criminal into our place of education, you know? Yeah. And then it turned into a thing, you know? And so that became the year of like, you know, picking sides and you know, an embattled like student union and like everything like that. But so Concordia already, I think because of the school I went to, there was an understanding of like the injustice and why you can stand on the side of like understanding why violent acts or destruction to personal or private property or public property happens in these moments, you know? But it was like and again, like it was also the year that like my first year was the year that Bamboozled had come out, and that movie I remember really loving and being really, but still not quite understanding exactly what I was watching, you know, as like someone who's not part of the Black community. It's like but you know, as a young person processing like how the media, you know, represents people that, you know, that aren't white skinned in ways that are, you know, that are obviously like completely biased and like one-dimensional in so many ways. So it's like, yeah, again, it's like even just but we're rewatching the film now as, you know, as a you know, someone in their late 30s, like going like, it's a nice, you know, still having those debates, you know, and still having those conversations. And I think now like the media is taking a little bit more care in the fact that you can't just put these images of like of destruction as like the only representations of what's happening within a community, you know?
Yeah. A Wendy's was burned down 2 days ago because someone got murdered there. That actually is what happens in Do the Right Thing. It's, you know, it's the destruction of the pizzeria is finally instantly explicable because now the real world events have caught up to it. But I remember thinking at the time that it felt almost like kind of a Shirley Jackson gesture, like at the end of the lottery, he's destroying the pizzeria to save the lives of Sal and Pino and Vito. And I don't know that that's true. Apparently, it's an alternate theory. Lee has always just said that Mookie has just seen Raheem be murdered, and all he can do is smash something. It's the only way to get his own anger out. But the title makes you search, right, for a reason, that this could be the right thing. And by, maybe by redirecting the anger of the mob towards the building instead of the people, that does it. Maybe it also explains why the mob immediately comes after the Korean grocery across the road, which it's not a laugh exactly, but there was this weird moment of like a release of tension with the audience where when Steve Park is swinging his broom and saying, I'm black, people in the theater kind of laughed, and it was a white audience, which makes it kind of wrong and worse, but it is like this, it's not funny at all. It's just, it's the anger in his voice and the terror behind his eyes is just so powerful. And I get it. It's someone with limited language trying to communicate that he's just as marginalized and just as racialized, and he is in no way an oppressor. Even though, like, for the previous 2 hours, we've watched him treat everybody with veiled hostility and push people out of the store and treat the mayor badly. And he's not wrong, but that's my point. And that's Lee's point, right? Nobody's wrong. Everybody's got a reason for the way they behave. It's just all of it is, the deck is so stacked against every character.
Yeah.
And it's just such a heartbreaker. And then watching, the other thing I noticed this time through was the way that the beauty fades. The neighborhood is just shot so lovingly, and with these rich reds and the yellows and the oranges, the colors behind everyone. And I think there's that moment where Lee lingers on the brick wall that says Tawana told the truth, and that's when it starts to get darker. And part of that is because the day is coming to an end, but part of it is like, no, this is my mission statement, and I'm just going to prove the worldview right as it goes. And I'd forgotten how good an actor Spike Lee is, or was. Like, he just doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
But like, he's an element of his first 3 movies. He's in all of them, and in Do the Right Thing, more than anything, he really shoulders most of it.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
he's really good. And watching him walk away from that slogan on the wall and just realize, oh yeah, the guy I've been watching is also the person holding not
camera.
actually holding the camera, but creating this world. It's just this weird thing where he just doesn't appear in his movies enough these days that I think of him as an actor. And so it took a second to be reminded. It's like, oh yeah, same guy. It's weird.
Yeah. How old was he when he did Do the Right Thing? I actually
32. I looked it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cause it's funny because like 100% I was remarking on that too, because he is such, I don't think he can act I think he can act, but I don't think he can act now because he's so recognizably Spike Lee,
Yeah, he's kind of settled into a certain type of delivery too. I don't know that he could get out of it.
Well, and I think because he is such a animated person, because he does, Mookie's such a subdued, like, kind of go with the flow guy that's just like, really, doesn't hold a ton of ambition and like drive, so the fact that he's there's like obviously very, very specific and precise filmmaker with these with a very distinct visual and like visual language and style, is playing the sort of like dopey character is actually quite remarkable, because he's not making the character embody, like the story embodies it ends with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and it's these conflicting, often opposing ideas that can seem contradictory, but they can both exist and be true at the same time. And this is the crux of the movie. It's like, do the right thing is that there are contradictory things that can also be the right thing to do, given your investment and your take on life and who you are, so the fact that he didn't place those ideals into a character but into the entire fabric of the movie is quite like, that's storytelling at its like finest, and to be able to do that and to weave it into all these different ways and different modes, and to bring in like all these amazing artists to make this film. Like, I read somewhere that it was Ruth Carter's first feature film that she did,
I think she worked with him on School Days, but he discovered her. Absolutely.
Oh,
I think her billing is like, she was Ruthie Carter, and then Ruth E. Carter, and then Ruth Carter. So it depends on where you look her up. But yeah,
Right.
she'd already worked with Lee before, and the colors, the fashions in School Days too, which is like an African
Yeah.
American campus look. That's Black Panther. It's amazing. It's so
Yeah.
close in so many ways to the stuff that she just had a much larger budget and a bigger, like a fantastical aspect to it. But it's like she's always had that sensibility, which is amazing. And here everything is so simple. There's all it's summer, so people aren't wearing a lot. The clothes are really functional and
Yeah.
basically sports
And so
bras and
many, and it's
t-shirts.
like, and also just so many jerseys, which is so great.
Yeah,
Like the first shot of, and actually I was wondering, it's interesting too, because there's everything is, you know, like the camera is very intentional and it's often very fixed, or it's like it's very, it's obviously like a very young's not the right word, but it's like it's it's a very assured camera, that he's
yeah,
using. It is like if there's a switch pan, you would know where that is going to end up. And but that first shot that we see Mookie, it's this like walking travel shot rather than just like this guy loves a dolly. Like that wasn't the shot he was starting in on for him to like when he's counting the dollar bills and you see the first thing you see is like the Jordan 23 and then he switches it out for a Jackie Robinson jersey
yeah,
and it's like all these like and there's so and just the amount and also in the art direction too like because there's so much there's so much text, there's so much graffiti, there's so much, there's so many jerseys, there's so much words that you're seeing in play that are also saying something about the film and the characters and yeah, like the guy that owns the Browns, like the white guy that owns the brownstone that they're calling like that's wearing the Celtics shirt, the Larry
yeah.
Bird Celtics shirt, and then
And they tell him to go back to Massachusetts, and he tells them he was born in Brooklyn, which is
and
just
they're like, yeah.
yeah, which is the best way to end that argument because it diffuses everything, but it doesn't diffuse anything. Yeah, and what happened to John Savage? He's I confused him with John Hurd for years, and then I realized they're different people. It's my own thing. Oh, and yeah, and as far as texture and detail, just I haven't even mentioned Mr. Senor Love Daddy's space,
Yeah.
which is just it's an integral space within the world of the film, but it is just packed with Black artists and art and the significance. Like everybody else is dealing with their history in sports metaphors. And he's just got the music. He has that, what is it, a minute and a half where he just lists
Yeah.
key African American artists and just through decades. And it's, I think that might have been the first time I noticed Samuel Jackson in anything. And he's so goddamn good. Like I had forgotten, every time I see it, I forget the mime bit he does when he's trying to get Mookie's attention and Mookie and Vito are outside with his sandwich.
Yeah.
And because and he's flapping his arms to get their attention and he's motioning to put the sandwich in his mouth. It's just like Samuel L. Jackson does not do that sort of thing anymore. And he's just so alive. It's just great. But his voice, like anchoring the film too, now retroactively, it's like, this is one of the most distinctive voices of the last 30 years of film history. And he was just a bit player there. Like he just sort of was a guy that Lee cast. I don't think he'd worked with him before.
Yeah, such a distinctive voice, and that omniscient DJ character, and being able to the music is so clearly DJ'd. Like Lee is he's so great with music as well, and just like placing all the things, and obviously like Public Enemy with Raheem's, Raheem's radio is like amazing and everything like this, but yeah. I love that. I love how he makes time and space for these like specific moments of like tribute and history, and he does that with Ruby Dee and Ozzy's character.
Yeah, sure.
As well as like they're like you're going into like a history of amazing theater and Hollywood and like African American actors, and like they're a couple, and so you see they're the two that like, there's so much tension between them, and this like loving neighborhood tension that obviously they come together at the end as friends, but like really kind of giving homage to these moments and these people, and there's so many. You think of this movie being made now and being like, well, you would some exec would say cut the list of names that are being mentioned, like why have that in the middle of this movie that is so fine and tight and precise to like give this space. And it's like, well, you got like that's the whole point, is that like art should be giving space and be giving homage and also just celebrating these important and influential artists on culture, so And yeah, he kind of always continues to kind of go back there and like never like lets up being like, I've got you, you're mine now, you're gonna watch this and I'm gonna like you're gonna learn something while you're here, you know? And and feeling that like at the end of like, you know, Black Klansman, you know, like I thought that was like such an amazing film and you know, and of course like it's you know, it's a period piece, it's raw, it's funny though, and it's like and then you get to those moments of like the footage of Charlottesville and you go, this it's a whole thing. It's that like this things haven't changed and they have gotten worse in so many ways too. And it's now again like all these things that are kind of like lived in the lore of like fictionalized films and being able to like light and shoot something and know somewhere in your heart that like that actor is going to get up off the ground. And then it's like these are the images now that are influencing how we see we see people and society, and like that's like it's no longer a reflection, it's just pointing a camera at society right now. And it's like it's an interesting kind to be a filmmaker because it's like where do you put your energies in, you know, in what types of stories are you wanting to tell? And I think, you know, the decades of Spike Lee's films that he's made and like commitment to, you know, social change through art is just like he's never wavered. Like say what you like about certain films that he has, but like he has not wavered off the track of like I'm making a point here, you know. And it's impressive like how many filmmakers have done that, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking about the exceptions, things like Inside Man or 25th Hour, where they're slick studio productions and they're not necessarily the first movie you would think about Spike Lee making, but he gets in there, he infects the material with his thing, and it ends up being about what he wants it to be about. Because again, how could he not? It's just if you hire Spike Lee, that's what you get.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen To Five Bloods yet. Have you watched it yet?
No, I haven't caught up to it yet. Rad reviewed it for us. It's on the list. It's definitely something I want to see, and it sounds like it's fascinating. The initial feedback on it sounds really promising.
I haven't read anything yet. I skimmed over Rad's review of it, but I want to watch it before. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited to see it. But yeah, it's a 2.5 hour film. I need to like give it an evening, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the best thing about this is that people are rediscovering entire libraries because they have the time to. Yeah. And this is going to sound pretentious, of course, but the cinema of Spike Lee has been so central to like parallel. He's 10 years older than I am, so he's been making movies as long as I've been aware of what movies are. Mm-hmm. And watching him come up and evolve and change and grow or refuse to grow depending on what the project is has been really interesting. And yeah, I had kind of that string of movies he'd made in the early 2010s sort of made me wonder if he really had it anymore. And then he went off and delivered Black Klansman, and it's like, okay, I'm invested again. Yeah. So yeah, I'm all in for this one. But the only thing I know about it for sure is that Delroy Lindo's character is a trumper. There's shots of him wearing the red cap. That's fascinating. What are you going to do with that image?
Kanye West, he's already done that image for us.
That's true. It's nothing new, but I'm really curious. And stuff on other things like I rediscovered Get on the Bus about 5 years ago.
Okay.
That was the one about the voters, like the bus of black voters going along. And it's the closest thing I think to Do the Right Thing that he's done, with just dialogue and character and then eventually catharsis. But he can only do what he wants to do. I think when his heart's not in it, you can tell on a given project. But the stuff that he really cares about, the stuff that he really puts himself into, is just richer and more richer, deeper, more complicated than it potentially has any right to be. I mean, the story about Do the Right Thing was originally developed at Paramount, and they wanted a softer ending, and they wanted him to take its teeth out. They wanted it to be a Martin Luther King film instead of a Malcolm X film, with no with reconciliation and hope. And there is reconciliation and there is hope, but it's angry. Like I was trying to come up with a metaphor for this, for what the film is versus because of the paired quotes, because of Malcolm and Martin. Martin Luther King spoke as from the position of someone who'd been swallowing his rage for the greater good for his entire life. And Malcolm X knew that that had to come out. Even though he had his epiphany and changed his position on the possibility of the races actually working together and getting along after Mecca, Malcolm X understood that you can't keep it bottled up forever because it gives you cancer. It kills you. And that's what Do the Right Thing is about to me. It's the sense that sooner or later it has to come out. And the sick feeling I had watching it this time, I think, was understanding that you're watching it boil over all the time. It isn't just the inciting incident. The whole movie is the inciting incident. Yeah. And I don't know that I got that before this time through. And that's just something I've been wrestling with. It feels, it feels very much as Lee understands who everybody is and does his best to give everyone humanity. I don't think there's anybody in it who comes off as a cartoon or a caricature. Except, maybe bugging out just because of the way that Lee and Ernest Dickerson shoot Giancarlo Esposito to make him look ridiculous. He's not wrong. Like he's big in his anger and he's demonstrative, and his name suggests that maybe he gets angry at literally everything, but he's not wrong. And Lee sees that and gives him that moment, and you can see this disaster coming from the very beginning because of it. And it's just, I really didn't think a movie I knew this well could hit me so hard again, or make me feel like I hadn't seen it before. And now I think that's probably more about me than it is about the film.
Well, it's a kind of, that's like a filmmaker's dream review, it's like to be able to keep kind of for a movie that, has been locked for 31 years, and for you to keep having new experiences with it, and it's still, and all that's happening is that you're learning more, or you're unpacking more. Like that's, in the similar way where it's like it's so much about what's kind of boiling, it's all about what's boiling under the surface, and the heat of New York, and the concrete, and the colors and everything that just are all part of that feeling that you have that's intangible, that because he wrote it and directed it, there's something that would have existed on the page that would have reflected that, but then also bringing in all the other artists that are going to bring their talents to Spike Lee's vision, and really just sort of getting in there and understanding all of that, I think this viewing for sure, and this recent viewing of revisiting it, this movie that it's one of my top 5 films, and just seeing how I think the attention to the message in every line, and every character says something, both meaningful, places their own identity, places their own feelings towards other people, and really you understand the neighborhood tension that just exists. And it's often a very, it's not a neighborhood that's about, it's still a neighborhood, it's still a community, it's still there are different ideas, and everyone's well, I understand where you're coming from. And I think with Spike Lee's sister, with Mookie's sister, it's she's often the sort of voice of reason, throughout, that is trying to see everyone's side and talk reason, and she's, speaks her version of why wanting something positive for the community to bugging out, instead of why don't we try to do something positive? And it's well, again, it's everyone's going to have their different way of how do we get change, and how do we have change, how do we have equality, how do we feel heard and represented, everyone's screaming that somewhere, including Sal and Pino and Vito, of their own identity and place that they feel is earned in the neighborhood. But yeah, it's so finely crafted to get to the point where you're of course this is what's going to happen. It's going to bubble over. It's going to explode. Of course this is the moment that there's no turning back. And also interesting too, because there's that minute piece of reconciliation between Mookie and Sal, where after he throws his money at him, and then they have that last exchange, and he's like, he basically, he says like, well, like, I'm gonna go. If that's all, if that's cool with you, you know, like, and there's something that like, that's probably the only thing that felt like a compromise or maybe dated, which I think now 2020 Spike Lee, if that was like a studio demand of being like, there needs to be something between these two that we feel that that he's forgiven Sal or something, or there's some kind of like, we're going to see eye to eye, which is like, that moment's not coming at that point in the day, that moment's coming very far down the road. And I think that like, again, the sort of, like, again, the like you said, like you kind of interpreted the Martin Luther King Jr. versus Malcolm X, like ethos, it's like, there's a frustration that, that becoming a stereotype or a trope, or becoming like perceived as like an angry, unreasonable person, you're not going to get your message. You have to make yourself palatable to a mainstream audience. And so the film, it seems like had to potentially do a little bit of that to make it like understood and palatable for, an audience, sitting at Cannes, or which now I think hopefully we don't have to have those sort of like, but like forgivenesses at the end. It's like, I mean, maybe we still do, I don't know, but like it definitely comes up in like in meetings I have of like different types of characters and stuff like that, but it's like maybe now we don't have to worry about, being, having characters perceived, racially as like a stereotype that is the angry whatever, So,
yeah. I mean, I remember people complaining about Spike Lee in the 90s, like, he seems so angry. Well, yeah, he kind of is, and he has every reason to be. It's weird that you're not angry if you watch his movies. But, I mean, other than Jungle Fever, which I think was just it doesn't harmonize the tones in a way that makes sense to me. Not that it's aimed at me or that I'm the audience for that film at all, but I remember just thinking he's trying too hard to get this across. But I also haven't watched it in something like 20 years, so maybe I should take another look at it, because I'm pretty sure I will see it differently now. Like that, and as you were saying, right, that's the thing. The movie doesn't change, we do. It's if we're lucky, we change in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully so. Yeah, like it's
Or change for the better, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're always changing and evolving for the better and understanding things. And him too, it's just like, again, it's like he's not without criticism, of his, you have this, like for something like Do the Right Thing, you have this many characters in a movie, and they're, you maybe Sister Mother's the only character, and Mookie's sister are the only characters that have like a little bit, like female characters that have a little bit more depth to them, and not even that much. Like poor Rosie Perez's character, and she's so great in it, but like, she's still very much a trope and a stereotype. And I know, well, I read, that like her experience in making the film was not exactly a pleasant one with Spike.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, and so hopefully, he just apologized for saying for defending Woody Allen over the weekend. So it's like,
oh, good.
Yeah, it was funny because just before we started talking, I like went on Twitter and then saw that he was apologizing for sexual harassment. And I was just like, oh God. I was like, no, I can't, right? Anyway, I was like, of course this had to happen. Spike, you had to do this. But he had defended, because Woody Allen's film is coming out, and that, his mark as a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's right. There's a new Woody Allen movie. Oh.
Yeah.
Proof that the world hasn't changed.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this whole idea of, people say the cancel culture. I was like, I don't think culture is canceling the people that should be canceled. So like, anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, like, and anyway, so I had read his apology on Twitter for defending, that his words were wrong, and that he does not take light the, sexual abuse and sexual harassment. But so hopefully all these filmmakers, you know, like it's very, these, you know, especially like these sort of very masculinated filmmakers from the 90s are all starting to evolve. And you know, and that this space is also given to more female filmmakers and, you know, BIPOC female filmmakers too. But yeah, but it's like, you see that over this, you know, over his like oeuvre, you know, over his like decades of work. And it's like, there's something, obviously there's a thread of you know, tone and style and message in all of his films that are so, you know, a signature Spike Lee movie, a Spike Lee joint, you know?
Yeah.
But that, you know, you learn something different from each one, you know? Even the documentaries that he does too.
Oh,
so.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Four Little Girls is still just devastating. And yeah, that's it too, right? He's been engaged with history. He's been engaged with the African-American experience of American history all along, and writing, it's not revisionist, it's a corrective, right? He's been working to do that through his entire career. And When the Levee Breaks, his doc about New Orleans, and just where he just takes the time and as he does with Mr. Chin, Your Love's Daddy's string of artists, he just forces you to see. He forces you to see what's been missing from the record, even though it's always been there.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Like that's part of his mission over 30 odd years. You know, I have to admire that.
Oh my gosh! I mean, he is a historian, absolutely. And like you said, like he is, it's a reclamation and it's a correcting of history, and also, like he does in BlacKkKlansman. It's like. So taking Birth of a Nation and like, we're going to put this back in your face and we're going to show this movie to you the way you're supposed to watch this, you know? And it's like, and do it again through that kind of complex lens of like seeing Alec Baldwin's character, and then like, it's just like, the layers of lenses and stripping them each away to just being like, you're getting my take of this story as a, you know, African American man from Brooklyn, you know, in his early 60s. Like, this is my lens on history. I'm going to tell it to you, and like you know, you can't look away. There's something amazing about that, you know?
Yeah, and studios are still paying him to do it, which is even better. Like he's not doing it independently. He's made them pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done. So before we wrap, the final question on the podcast is always the same, which is there anything of Do the Right Thing that you have used or borrowed or homaged or stolen or full on inserted into your own work anywhere? Is it something that influences you?
I mean, the thing that I love about his writing, and I'm going to see, let me just like think about it, if Do the Right Thing specifically
sure
is in that. I mean, Do the Right Thing is like exactly the type of story that I wouldn't necessarily tell it like Spike Lee has told it, because it's not my experience and I'm not an African American man.
Sure.
I'm a half Chinese woman, you know. But telling the stories of community and racial injustice and doing it in a way that is, you know, like I said at the beginning, like doing it in a way that's unapologetic, that has like these characters that are flawed, have you know, have their own like kind of crosses to bear, and are also funny, and also like just not shy away from the fact that like you can make a drama about about a marginalized community, or music, or about people that are marginalized or are dealing with injustices and social inequity, and also do it without making them into victims or making it into like a sob story, and making them like very powerful, strong characters that are struggling, like, you know, are struggling, because you don't make a movie about people that aren't struggling with something, like that is the conflict,
sure,
but are struggling, sure. but and in placing their identity and figuring out their identity and taking up space and place. And I think for the films that like I've made as a producer, as a director, this is something that's like, I don't want to shy away or pull any punches in the way that I tell a story, and I want it to be as lean as possible. I want it to be meaningful, you know? And that, you know, like and it's funny, like I know that you had Jeff Barnaby on the podcast, and Jeff and I, because I was one of the producers of Rhymes for Young Gold, and like on set we would have debates about Spike Lee because he knew how much I loved him, and he was like, this guy. And I was like, and hilarious because like obviously Rhymes is a very like strong, racially charged, and about like social injustice and correcting like, institutional racism,
Yeah. With a visual flair that does kind of echo what Ernest Dickerson and Spike Lee were doing. Yeah, like just those beautiful composed images right in the middle of this angry film.
Yeah, and I think in like the stuff that I'm writing, the stuff that I'm working on, there has to be that like struggle of character. Now, my film, The Rest of Us, does not deal with racial injustice in any kind of way, but but like the documentary I'm working on now, No Ordinary Man, like talking about the intersection of like race and gender and history and media representation and telling one's own story, I think, is such an important thing, and bringing that into the fabric and having fun with it, like Do the Right Thing, is also such a fun, exhilarating experience, and using music and using the setting and using your art direction and using these things in a way that really elevate your story. Now I do it in a much more naturalistic way, but like elevating your story through these things where it's like make a choice of the songs that you're listening to, make a choice, like have it, like if you don't have a literal DJ, as a character in the film, make your characters into a DJ, like make them pick the soundtrack, and so that has been always like a fun thing, and that's the stage I'm getting into now with the music biopic that I'm doing. It's like getting into the music. It's like let's bring this thing to the next level and tell a story with the soundscape, So yeah, I mean, and just in these times, it's like for me, it's like and going back to writing, it's like it's a return to telling the stories that I think, as a person of color, as a woman who has a specific experience growing up in the East Coast of Canada, like I feel like there are stories about Canada, and there's stories about that I haven't seen reflected on screen that are my experience, and I feel like those things are changing, but I do think that is the reason I was so inspired by Spike Lee, was that like it was the first time I had seen a voice like his, and a voice like his that wasn't, he was telling movies from his perspective, and that was like shockingly exciting. So,
Yeah, so, I hear that. I hear that a lot from people about the movies they choose are the ones that showed them there might be another way, or shows them there might be a way for them, which just, that's the best thing you can say about art is I see stuff all the time that makes me feel humbled and awed that someone else could come up with that image or that idea or tell the story in a certain way. But I connect to those differently than the ones that feel like they're speaking to me because they were made directly for me. The way they connect to me by saying, look, this is a thing that I know, let's explore this together. And then to come out of it thinking that there's a path, there's a possibility for your own stuff too. That's just, that's good. That's got to be good.
It is. It's the time now, and like I'm thinking, like when I got out of film school in in 2004 or so. Yeah, it was 2004, and yeah, wanting to like make homage to all of those filmmakers that I loved, and they happened to almost all of them were men because those were the films I was exposed to.
Sure.
Like I remember the first time discovering Lynn Ramsey, and I was like, oh my gosh! And that was actually the debate. I was like, is it Ratcatcher or is it Do the Right Thing? And I'm like, it's not going to be a movie about white people. but yeah, like, and I think it just kind of continues on. It's an exciting time, and it's an important time to be making art, and to be making art that is meaningful and that is helping the world, and it's nice. It's nice. That's not the right word, but it's reassuring to some degree to see places like Hollywood, and here too, but like it's people are, it's a typical Canadian fashion. It's like less sort of in your face, where it's like we need to like look at the type of stories that we're supporting and we're telling, and how we've represented people on screen, and finally it's like people are looking like maybe not all cops are heroes,
Yeah.
Maybe not, like maybe that is not a thing we need to keep perpetuating when we know that is not the truth, and and just that's a thing too of like, and like going back to the beginning of like, Do the Right Thing was a movie that is incredibly accessible, I think, so artfully told, and in a story that's like, that is so complex with so many different characters that you have, it doesn't matter who you are, you have an endpoint somehow into this movie. And to see that so similar to where I grew up in Nova Scotia. And again, like not being kind of like that Korean grocer where it's like, well, we're not white and we're not black. Where do we kind of fit into the community? Like it's, and being immigrants, we don't have a history in this place. We moved there. So and never seeing that kind of reflected in films that were being made about the region at the time. Like Corey Bowles is changing that, but like Corey and some other filmmakers, of course, that have been working in Nova Scotia for a long time, of course, but like I would always, like when I moved to Montreal, it's like people really just thought of Nova Scotia as like the friendly fisherman. I'm like, that's not my experience. Like my experience was so much different than that and richer in a lot of ways, but also like you're erasing a huge history of people, or you're ignoring a huge population, a huge community, and you're erasing their history and contribution because again, like you haven't figured out that the complexities of representing different types of people on screen can exist and people will understand it, like it's I think again it was like CBC or whoever was making films in these places were just like, well, people of the rest of Canada know that there's unemployed fishermen over there, like
yeah. That's the one thing we all know across the country, right? About that one province, about that one place. That's just how it works in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why everyone hates Toronto. I don't know why exactly, but I don't know what that one thing is, but the one thing is that we all hate Toronto.
I don't think that's how we felt in Nova Scotia, but I mean, in Montreal, it's a different situation. And it's not necessarily a hate, it's more just like, it's a rival city.
Yeah. No, I just made it all about myself. That's on me.
Wow. Yeah.
My thanks to Aisling Chin-Yee, whose first feature, The Rest of Us, is available today on digital and on demand. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire Shedden. She knows what she did. You can find Aisling on Twitter at Spectraversa, all one word, SPECTRAVERSA, and you can find Do the Right Thing on Blu-ray and DVD in the Criterion Collection in an excellent special edition. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting a bunch of podcasts in addition to writing about movies, and you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network, including Jordan Heath Rawlings' The Big Story, which is still essential listening throughout this wonderful plague we're having. Stay inside. Watch movies. I'll see you next week.